Good day. Welcome, my dear students, to the 10th lecture of Mechanics of Solids. So, in this class, we will discuss about material behavior. In the last class, we discussed two important topics in Mechanics of Solids. The first one is stress, and the second one is strain. So, based on that, we will study what happened to a body when it is subjected to external force. Some internal resistance is developed across the cross section of the body, and based on that we can define stress. And there are some deformation on a body when it is subjected to external force. Based on that we can define strain. And another important aspect of mechanics of solid is material selection or the material behavior. We know for any design process, the selection of suitable material is an important thing. Because this material selection is an important step in design process. For example, for the design of any structure, we can determine the cross section of the structure, or we can determine the shape and size of the structure. But if we use inappropriate material for that application, that may lead to the failure of the structure. So, for example, for a column like structure, here some vertical force is acting on this column material. Okay, for this column of a building, we can select different materials. There are number of materials are available to construct this column. We can use reinforced concrete, we can use wood or steel. So there are different materials are available. So out of these different materials, a design engineer should select a best suitable material for this application. Okay, so for that we should know the material behavior. What is the behavior of the material with the external conditions? The external conditions are maybe the external load. There are different type of load may act on this structure. So based on the type of load, we should select a material, and other environmental conditions also affect the selection of material. And materials are selected for specific application depend on their properties and characteristics. So each material has different properties and characteristics. So while selecting a particular material for any application, we should consider the properties and characteristics of the material. And basically materials are classified into two. First one is ductile material and second one is brittle material. You know what is ductile material? For a ductile material, when it is subjected to external force, there will be a large deformation for this material before rupture. Okay, before rupture, there will be a large deformation. That is a ductile material. And more specifically, we can drawn that ductile material into a very small diameter wire. So that is the main characteristics of ductile material. For example, if you consider this one, say in this material, if we apply a particular amount of load, before rupture, it can deform in high magnitude. Okay, and it can easily drawn into thin wire. We already discussed this in the material science class. What is ductile material and what is the nature of ductile material? So there will be a huge deformation before rupture for ductile material. For example, mild steel. Mild steel is an important example for ductile material. And engineers commonly choose ductile material for design because of two reasons. The first reason is it can capable to absorb shock and energy. Okay, it can easily absorb shock and or impact energy acting on that structure. And another one it show a huge deformation before rupture. So the structure which made with the ductile material gives a warning before failure. So we can notice a huge deformation before failure. So that is a warning. So that is the first thing. And second thing, for making different components, we can use different manufacturing process where we deform the raw materials. For example, in forging process. In forging process, we use a die and we apply a huge compressive force on the workpiece and we produce a particular shape by the application of external compressive force. And here the material should be very ductile. Then only it can deform into this shape without any fracture. So most of our material which is made with the forging or rolling like a manufacturing process need this ductile behavior. Okay, so commonly we use ductile material for our engineering applications. And next one is brittle material. This type of material exhibit little or no yielding failure, deformation before failure. For example, grey cast iron or some glass material or some crockery material. We can see if you take a crockery material, you can see when we apply an external load, there will not be deformation before failure. There will be sudden failure without any deformation. So that is a brittle material. So basically materials are classified into these two categories, ductile and brittle material. And for the selection of material, we should know the properties of the material. So to evaluate or to calculate the properties or to find out the properties of the material, we can use different tests. There are different tests are available for determining these properties of the material. And for that, we can use tension test and compressive stress and shear stress. So there are different tests are available. We can use different hardness tests. Some tests used to determine the toughness of the material. So there are different tests are available. But commonly we use tension test. Tension test to determine its yield strength, its ultimate strength, its fracture strength, and other properties like Young's modulus, etc. of a material. So next we will discuss about tension test. Tension test. So this is one of the most common mechanical stress strain test is that is called tension test. Here in this tension test, we use a standard specimen, and that standard specimen is deformed up to fracture point. Okay, and here in this standard specimen, we apply load gradually increasing, and the nature of the load is tensile. Okay, we apply a load which is in tensile nature, and the load is applied along the uniaxial direction, and during the test we apply the load in a gradually increasing manner. Okay, so that is uniaxial tension test. Okay, and the result from this tension test is stress strain graph. We got a stress strain graph from this tension test. So we got different material behavior from this tension test, and basically the compression test and the tension test is almost equal, and the nature of applied load is only different in tension and the compression test. So in uniaxial tension test, that is a static type, we gradually increase the load in uniaxial direction for this tension test. And the increase in load is comparatively very slowly from 0 to a certain value. And here we use a standard specimen. And the standard specimen shape is like this. This is the shape of the standard specimen. Here we have two portions. The two end portions are with a higher diameter. So here most commonly we use rounded shapes standard specimens, and the rectangular shape specimens also available. But standard specimen here use a rounded specimen, and in the two ends the diameter is higher than that of this center portion. And in the center portion we maintain a uniform diameter length, and this area, the reduced area, is commonly according to one standard it is 60 mm. 60 mm. So this is a standard specimen. In the standard specimen we use a gauge length. So the gauge length is this is the 2 point in this uniform cross section area of the center region, and between these 2 points this length is called gauge length. Okay, so here actually we measure the mechanical properties of the specimen. Okay, so for performing this uniaxial tension test, first we grip this specimen, the ends of this specimen are secured in the grips of a uniaxial tension machine, test machine. Okay, there we have two holding setup in the UTM machine where we grip the two ends of this specimen, and in that machine, UTM machine, there is a unit for applying load to the specimen, and the load is applied very slowly by the gradual increase load, tensile load is applied to the specimen, and the load is applied either with a hydraulic or mechanical drive. Okay, and so load is gradually applied. With respect to the applied load, there will be some deformation on this specimen, and that deformation is recorded with some recording device. Okay, so we know what is the deformation on the specimen with respect to the increase in load. Okay, from that we can determine the stress and the strain. So that is the testing procedure. So here the bar is, or the specimen is tested under constant axial pull, and the load will apply till the member fail. Okay, and here we only measure the deformation in this gauge length. Okay, we measure the deformation only in the gauge length. Commonly we use, according to one standard, the gauge length is equal to 50 mm, and the diameter of the specimen in this area is 12.8 mm. And after the specimen is tested, after failure, we will remeasure the length of the gauge length, and we will see how much extension for this gauge length segment has undergone, which will give us the measure of the elongation of the material. Okay, so initially we measure this is 50 mm, and after deformation, after the failure of the specimen, again we will measure the length between these 2 points, and that will give the amount of deformation on the gauge length. From this we can calculate the percentage of elongation, etc. So this is a standard specimen used to measure or used in UTM setup. And this is the specimen before failure and after failure. This is a specimen before failure and after failure. Here we can see in this standard specimen, this is the gauge length, and after failure we can see this is the fracture point, and here we can see a cup and cone type shape in the fracture point, and this is the final length between the same point. So when it is subjected to tensile test, this length will increase. The final length will be higher than that of original length. Okay. And here in this, the specimen is gripped between the end grippers of the UTM. And to measure the variation in length of variation in gauge length, we use a device called a extensometer. So extensometer is used to measure the variation of the gauge length. So with respect to increasing the external tensile load, the length between these 2 points will increase. That variation of length is measured using the device called a extensometer. Extensometers are commonly two types. It may be a contact type extensometer, or it may be a non-contact type like a video extensometer or laser extensometer can be used to measure the variation of length between these 2 points. And the load is during the UTM test, the load is applied gradually, and in the regular interval the corresponding extension is measured using the extensometer, and the increased load is increased up to the fracture point. So that is the UTM test. So I will show a video of how this UTM test is conducted. Here plain carbon steel is used, standard specimen. So this is the gauge length between these 2 points, and this is the original diameter of the specimen, and these two ends are the gripping points which is connected to the UTM. So this is the UTM machine. So this is the UTM machine. Here this is a hydraulically or electrically operated one, and between these two jaw we can fix this specimen, standard specimen, and we can apply tensile load to the standard specimen using this UTM machine. And the entire data from this UTM machine, how much amount of load is applied and how much amount of deformations on the standard specimen can be measured and can send into this computer. So this is a contact type extensometer, and we test the 2 points of the extensometer at the ends of the gauge length. Okay, we mark 2 points on the at the ends of the gauge length. So we test this extensometer at that 2 points. So this is a contact type extensometer. Similarly, we can use video type extensometer or laser based extensometer to measure the deformation. So this is a force elongation diagram, and here we gradually increase the load on this specimen, and which can be measured or censored using some sensors and can be directly sent to the computer. And the extension between the gauge length is, or the elongation between the gauge lengths can be measured using extensometer, and that is also directly can send to this computer. And in this computer, a graph can be drawn with respect to these two values, force and elongation. So after a particular limit, at this point, a necking is formed when the force or the stress reaches an ultimate value. Here, this is the ultimate value, that is the maximum stress that can carried by this specimen. And at this ultimate point, a necking will be formed on this point of the specimen. See the deformation? See the deformation here? Deformation. So here the diameter is reduced, and finally a cup and cone type fracture. So this is the graph showing the variation of folds and elongation. Okay. So this is the graph between folds and elongation. But commonly we use, instead of folds and elongation, commonly we use stress and strain graph. The shape of the graph is same, but instead of folds we use stress, and instead of this elongation we use strain. The reason is that if you use folds and elongation with respect to the specimen, this folds and elongation graph is only only based on this specimen. If we change the specimen, for example, if we change the gauge length, or if we change the diameter of this specimen or shape of the specimen, then the entire values of this graph will vary. So we don't get any standard property from this graph. So instead of for this force and elongation, we can use stress and strain. So by dividing this force with the original area, we got stress, and by dividing this elongation, deformation with the original length, we got strain. So if we use stress and strain instead of this force and elongation, then we can we will get a standard values from this graph. So that is why we use stress strain graph instead of this force and elongation. Initially we got data in terms of force and elongation, but after dividing with the area and dividing with this original length, we can change this force and elongation graph into stress strain graph. Okay, and here this is the fracture point, and after necking we got a fracture here, and a cup and cone type of fracture can be visible here. So this is the force elongation graph. So here we can see some dip portion here. This is this type of some type of material showing this type of yield point, some specific yield point, like mild steel material showing this specific yield point in the stress strain graph. So this is the specimen after fracture. We can check the difference in length between the gauge points using this fractured specimen and original specimen. And here we can see the difference. Here this is the neck region, and cup and cone type of fracture can see here. Another type of material is material without yield deformation. It's an aluminum alloy. So aluminum type of material will not show any specific yield point. Okay. So the testing procedure is same, but the graph, stress strain graph will be. Then the testing is same, procedure is same. And here we can see a neck region, and this is the fracture region, fracture point, and this is a graph. Here we cannot see some that dip region in the aluminum specimen. So this is another type of stress strain graph without any specific yield point. So, so this is the uniaxial tension test. So this is the original specimen, and this one is the final specimen. So after conducting this test, we got two data. The first one is force applied, external force applied, and the second one is the elongation on the specimen between the gauge length. Okay, and from the force we can directly calculate stress, and this graph is called engineering stress strain graph. Okay, this graph is called engineering stress strain graph, and in this graph here we divide the force which is available from the testing machine with the original area of the original cross section area of the specimen, and the cross section area is nothing but the cross section area on the gauge length. Okay, this cross section area. So the force divided by original cross section area gives stress value, and similarly the elongation, we got the elongation from the extensometer, and the elongation divided by original length gives strain value, and we can plot this stress strain graph, and this is the stress strain graph available from the UTM testing, derived from this UTM testing. So this is the stress strain graph. First you consider this, don't consider this dotted one, consider this one. Okay, this is a stress strain graph, and there are different points on this stress strain graph. There are different points on this stress strain graph, and the first point is the P, proportionality limit point. Proportionality limit point, and what is the importance of that point? Up to that point, up to this proportionality point, the stress is directly proportional to strain. Anywhere in this line, the slope will be same. The slope will be same. So that is called, this point is called proportionality limit point. The stress is directly proportional to strain. Okay, and the next point is called elastic point. This point is called elastic point, and between this proportionality and elastic point, the main difference is that material will be elastic up to this point E. Up to this point E, the material will be elastic. That means when we release the load, the material will come back to its initial shape and size suddenly. It will come back to its initial shape and size. So that is why the material is elastic, but that elastic nature only show when the stress is up to this E point. When the stress up to this E point, then only material show this elastic nature. When we release the load, material come back to its initial shape and size. Okay, and difference between this proportionality and the elastic point is that up to proportionality limit also the material is elastic and the stress proportional to strain. Stress is proportional to strain up to proportionality limit. But between this proportionality limit and elastic limit, the stress is not proportional to strain, but material will be elastic. Material will be elastic. But most of the material, this proportionality limit and elastic limit will coincide. There is no visible gap between this proportionality and the elastic limit. And after elastic limit, we have another point that is called yield point. Yield point. And what is the importance of yield point? Yield point is the transition from elastic nature to plastic nature of the material. That is a transition point from elastic nature to plastic nature of the material. That means after this yield point, the material will be plastic in nature, or when we release the load acting on that material, the material will not come back to its initial shape and size. The material will not come back to its initial shape and size. For example, here in this material, here I am applying a load, I am releasing the load. Here we can see the material will not come back to its initial shape and size. So we can say this material is plastic in this stress value. In this stress value, this material is plastic. But for another material, if we take this material, I am applying an external load and I release the load, the material come back to its initial shape and size. So this is a elastic material. Okay, elastic, showing elastic nature. So after this point Y, the yield point, material show a plastic nature. Material show a plastic nature. And there are two, this is the graph for mild steel material. And for mild steel, there are two yield points. The upper one is called upper yield point, and this one is called lower yield point. And this dip region is called yield plateau. This dip region is called yield plateau. Here we can see what happened up to point Y, the stress is increased, and same way the strain also increases. Stress and strain are increasing. Okay, but after Y we can see the strain is increased without any increase in stress. Without any increase in stress. And we got this point Y dash, that is lower yield point. After yield point, again that is a strain hardening region. Strain hardening region where the plastic deformation takes place with the increase in stress. Okay, with the increase in stress. And these 2 points are called yield points. So for engineering design, commonly engineers use yield strength or yield stress as the design strength or design stress. After yield stress, what happened? Material plastically deformed. Okay, and what is the reason for this dip area, yield plateau? and we already discussed this in the material science class. And for a polycrystalline material, so for a polycrystalline material, this is a single grain, this is the another grain. In between these two grain we have a grain boundary, and when the slip is propagating in this direction, it can easily propagate because of the closely packed arrangement within the grains. Okay, within the grain. But when the slip reaches this point, grain boundary, the slip propagation will be difficult, because this grain boundary offer a barrier for the slip propagation, and thereby the deformation of the material also will be difficult in the grain boundary region. Okay, so the amount of stress required to cross this grain boundary will be high. So when the slip propagate and when it reaches this point, then up to this point it is very easy, and that is why this dip in this y dash. Up to this point it is very easy, the deformation is very easy. But after this lower yield point, we need to apply more amount of stress for deformation, and that stress applied is used to cross this grain boundary, to cross the slip barrier, the grain boundary barrier, to cross the grain boundary barrier. Okay, so we need to apply more amount of stress for crossing the slip with this grain boundary barrier. That is why the stress again increase after y dash. So this is basically based on the microstructure of the material. We already discussed this in the material science class. So again the stress value increases and it reaches a point called U, the ultimate stress region, and this is the maximum stress carrying capacity of that material. Okay, maximum stress carrying capacity of that material, and at the point U, the necking start. We already see what is necking. So the necking at any point on the gauge length start when the stress reaches this ultimate value. Okay, that is the maximum value of stress. We can see from the graph, this is the maximum value of stress which can carry by a specimen. When the specimen reaches the ultimate stress, again what happened? Again the material weakened, or the necking further increased, and the diameter in the neck region reduced. Actually material is not weakened, the diameter within the neck region decreased, and thereby the stress also decreased. Okay, the stress is decreased and which reached the rupture point. In the rupture point, the material is fractured and a cup and cone type fracture occur on the material. Okay, so here we have two stress mainly. The first one is ultimate stress and second one is yield stress, and we represent this ultimate stress sigma T and yield stress sigma Y. For the design we can use any of this stress. For example, this is a bar member. I am applying a load on this member or stress on this member. Okay, when I apply stress, for example 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, when it reaches sigma y up to sigma y value of stress, here I am applying stress just less than sigma y value, then I release the load, release the stress. What happened? The material is elongated. After elongation, when I release the stress, material come back to its initial shape and size. But when the stress I applied cross the sigma y value, the material will not come back to its initial shape and size. So material undergoes plastic deformation. Okay, plastic deformation. And again I increase the stress and which reach sigma t value. That is the maximum tension load carrying capacity of that material. When it reaches the sigma t value, ultimate stress value, what happens? Some neckings start to form at any point on the material. A necking is formed. And finally, material fractured. So while designing, we can use either the sigma t or sigma y. We can use sigma t or sigma y. If we design a particle member based on sigma y, then material will not deform plastically on its working condition. Material will not fracture because we design and we decide the dimensions and shape of the component or structure member based on the sigma y value. So on its working condition, the stress developed across any cross section of this member or across any point on this member will not higher than that of sigma y value. That is a design based on sigma y. If it is not greater than sigma y, its working condition stress at any point on this member will not greater than sigma y value. That means the material will not plastically deformed during its working condition. There will be some deformation, but after the release it regains its original shape and size. It is an elastic deformation. So that is the design based on sigma y. And in some case we design based on sigma t, that is ultimate stress. If we design based on ultimate stress, what happen? It's when the component or structure is on its working condition, there will be some plastic deformation for that member. Because sigma t is greater than sigma y. On its working condition, when the stress is greater than sigma y, what happen? Of course, this there will be some plastic deformation, but there will not be any failure because the stress should be greater than sigma t for failure. Okay, so there will not be any failure, but commonly engineers use the sigma y value for this design. What is the reason? Because if it is cross sigma y, there will be some plastic deformation and it will affect its intended functions. If there is any plastic deformation on the member, it will affect its intended functions. So commonly use engineers sigma y value for the design. Okay, so we have to design based on sigma y. And to find the cross section of the particular member, for example, if the load 10 Newton is acting, and for this material the Newton per meter mm square is this is the sigma y value of the material. Okay, so here sigma y is the yield stress. If the yield stress is sigma y, then we can find the cross section area. Sigma stress is equal to force by area, that is equal to 10 Newton by area is equal to 20 Newton per mm square from area equal to particular value. So for that structure with the cross section area, this is equal to 1 by 2. Okay, 1 by 2 mm, 0.5 mm. So for this component with the 0.5 mm area, cross section area, carrying 10 Newton, then corresponding stress will be 20 Newton per mm square. That is the sigma y of that material. So this is in the elastic limit. It is not cross the yield stress. So there will not be any plastic deformation for the material. Okay, so that is the design based on sigma y. So from this graph we got that, and the graph which I explained is called conventional stress strain graph or engineering stress strain graph or nominal stress strain graph, because here we calculate the stress using the original area of the original cross-section area of the specimen. Instantaneously this force value is changing because we gradually increase the force value, but that force value divided by the original cross-section area of the specimen. Here for the specimen there will be an original cross-section area. Initially there will be an area. That cross-section area will be the divide this instantaneous force divided by that original cross-section area gives this stress value. So that cross-section actually with respect to applied load, this cross-section area will decrease. Okay, if we increase the stress load acting on the specimen, correspondingly this cross-section area will decrease, but we don't consider that variation of cross-section area. For calculation of conventional or nominal or engineering stress strain graph, we use original cross-section area, force by original cross-section area. Okay, that is called conventional stress strain graph. There is another one stress strain graph which is called true stress strain graph. This is called true stress strain graph. In case of true stress strain graph, instead of using this original cross-section area, here we use instantaneous cross-section area. Instantaneous cross-section area. And here we can see the deviation from engineering stress strain and true stress strain graph is start from here, from this point. And actually from this point, the cross-section area starts to decrease. Cross-section area in the gauge length starts to decrease. So when the cross-section area decreases, the force by cross-section area, okay, the stress value also increases, and the stress strain diagram deviate from the engineering stress strain graph, and this is called true stress strain graph. So in the true stress strain graph we use instantaneous cross-section area of this specimen. Okay, and actually after ultimate stress point, the true stress strain graph is increasing because here we use instantaneous cross-section. So after ultimate point the necking is formed, the cross-section area is reduced, and if the cross-section area is reduced, then of course this stress value also will be increased. Okay, stress value will increase. So this is called true stress strain graph. This one is called engineering stress strain graph. Okay, and this is the plastic region. From this elastic or yield point, the plastic region is this one, and this region is called elastic region. So this is the proportionality limit, elastic limit, upper yield point, lower yield point, the ultimate stress rupture point. Finally the fracture happen in this point, rupture point. And corresponding to yield each point, the stress value is this is proportionality limit stress, yield elastic stress, yield stress, ultimate stress, rupture stress. Similarly, strain also, the strain corresponding to yield point, strain corresponding to ultimate point, strain corresponding to rupture. Okay, so that is the different data available from this stress strain graph. So we already discussed about this engineering stress strain graph. In the engineering stress strain graph we use force by original cross-section area, and true stress strain graph we use force by instantaneous cross-section area. So stress is equal to force by instantaneous cross-section area, and corresponding strain is equal to log of instantaneous change in length divided by original area, Li by L0. That is the strain corresponding to true strain. This is true strain, this is true stress. Okay, and if there is no change in volume, then we can relate this true stress and engineering stress by using this formula. Sigma I, that is true stress is equal to engineering stress into 1 plus strain. True strain is equal to log of 1 plus strain. So that is the relation between the engineering stress and the engineering true stress. Engineering strain and true strain. This is the relationship. And we already discussed different points, proportionality point and this elastic limit, and that dip region is called yield plateau, upper yield point, etc. And this one is for mild steel like material. There will be a definite yield point for this material, but aluminum like material we cannot see any definite yield point. Here we can see this is the aluminum like material, and here there is no definite yield point in the stress strain graph. So to find the yield point is important because we design based on the yield point. Beyond yield point there will be a plastic deformation, and below yield point, if the stress is applied below yield point, there will not be any plastic deformation. Deformation will be elastic in nature. So we have to find the yield point, but here there is no specific point, specific yield point in this graph. So for that we use a method, and initially we calculate the 0.2% proof stress. That means if the total strain is 100 mm, we take 2 mm, we mark 2 mm here. Then draw a line which is parallel to this line and which will intersect at this point, and this point will be the yield point of that material. Okay. So this method is proof stress method. Using this method we can calculate the yield point. So in this type of material we cannot see any specific yield point. So this is also a ductile material. Aluminum is a ductile material, but we cannot see any yield point. But here we have a ultimate point and a rupture point. Okay. The maximum stress will be ultimate stress, and the rupture stress is the fracture stress. And here also there will be a necking and a fracture on this material. So it's a ductile material. Aluminum also ductile material. So for ductile material we have stress strain diagram like this, as well as this type of stress strain diagram. And stress strain diagram for ductile material with a perfect yield point, and without the stress strain diagram for a ductile material without any yield point. Another one is the stress strain diagram for a brittle material. So there will not be any deformation or little deformation before fracture is called brittle material, like a cast iron or glass like material. Okay. So this is the stress strain diagram. And there is no ultimate point, there is no yield point or elastic point for this brittle material. The only one point is the fracture point. Okay, there is no appreciable change in rate of strain, or there is no appreciable deformation before fracture. There is no necking. Before fracture there is no necking phenomena on this brittle material. Okay, so this is the graph showing the deformation on a, or the stress strain diagram on a brittle material. So this is the difference between the brittle and the ductile material stress strain diagram. So this is for a brittle material without any specific point on the graph, and this is for ductile material. And the area inside the graph is called the energy absorbed by the material before rupture. Okay, and from this we can see the area inside the graph is higher for ductile material compared to brittle material. So before fracture, ductile material can carry more energy than that of brittle material, because the shaded area within the graph of brittle material is lower than that of ductile material. So area within the, and that is called toughness of the material. If this area is higher, the shaded area is higher. If the shaded area is higher, then the material will be more tougher in nature. And materials can be classified into different based on this behavior, on different behavior. First one is homogeneous material. First one is homogeneous material. In homogeneous material, the properties, physical and mechanical property, will be same throughout the volume. If you take any point on the homogeneous material, it show equal property. So that is a homogeneous material. Okay, material throughout its volume, the mechanical and the physical properties will be same for a homogeneous material. So if we take any point, its property will be same. That is for homogeneous material. Next one is isotropic material. We know what is isotropic material. The properties will be same in every direction. Every direction, any property, it may be mechanical property or electrical property or magnetic property. In any direction, the property will be same. That is isotropic material. Anisotropy material, for anisotropy material, the property will be dependent upon the direction considered. Okay, the property will be different in different directions. For example, if you take a composite material, a reinforced composite material, fiber reinforced composite material. So in this direction, its tensile strength will be higher because the fibers are arranged in this direction for a composite material. But in this direction, its tensile strength will be lower. So in different direction, its strength is different. Similarly, different properties will be depend upon the direction of which considered. So that is called anisotropic material. The properties will not be same in every direction. Another one is orthotropic material. In this material, have different properties in different orthogonal axes. In different orthogonal axes, the properties will be different. So such type of material is called orthotropic material. For example, in case of wood, if we take wood, we can see in this direction the strength will be different, but in another orthogonal direction the strength will be different, because here also the fibers are arranged in the different directions. So for bamboo or any other wood-like material, this property will be different in the different orthogonal direction. Okay, so that is another type of material. So the materials can be classified based on this concept. Next one is based on the stress strain graph. We got some relation between stress and strain. We already studied about stress and strain, but there is a relation between stress and strain. And from the stress strain graph, we can see some relation between stress and strain. And what is the relation? Up to a particular point, that is called proportionality limit or elastic limit, the stress is directly proportional to strain. And that relation is explained based on a law that called Hooke's law. Hooke's law. The stress strain relation is explained using this law, Hooke's law. Or another name for this Hooke's law is called constitutive relationship. Constitutive relationship for a material subject to external law. Okay, stress strain relationship. So from the stress strain diagram for any engineering material, there will be a linear relationship between stress and strain. There will be a linear relationship between in this region up to elastic or proportional limit, elastic limit, the stress is directly proportional to strain. Stress is directly proportional to strain. And there is a condition for this. There is a condition for this. Stress is directly proportional to strain. The material should be linearly elastic isotropic material. What are the conditions? The material should be isotropic in nature. That means every direction is mechanical and physical properties should be same. Second condition is that the material, the load applied or the stress applied should be within elastic limit or the linearly elastic material. Okay, so the load applied should be within elastic limit. So for linearly elastic isotropic material, so this is Hooke's law. Stress is directly proportional to strain is not a Hooke's law. According to Hooke's law, for a linearly elastic isotropic material, this stress is directly proportional to strain. That is Hooke's law. And to remove this proportionality, we can multiply it with a constant. So stress is equal to a constant value E into strain. A constant value E into strain, and this E is called Young's modulus or modulus of elasticity. Modulus of elasticity or Young's modulus. Young's modulus. And what is Young's modulus? That is nothing but it is the slope of this graph up to elastic limit. Slope of this graph, because this is stress, this is strain. The slope of this graph will be stress by strain. So Young's modulus or modulus of elasticity is the slope of this graph, stress strain graph up to elastic limit. And this Hooke's law or the elastic Young's modulus is only valid up to elastic limit. And this modulus of elasticity is the mechanical property of a material. It is the property of material. If you take steel, it has one E value. For example, 200 gigapascal. If you take copper, it has another E value. If you take aluminium, it has another E value. So the E value is a property of the material. For a particular material, there will be a specific E value, Young's modulus value. Okay, the E value will be a constant, and that is a property of a material. So E is equal to sigma by epsilon. For E for steel is equal to, for example, E for steel is equal, a particular type of steel is equal to 400 gigapascal. And if you take another one, for rubber, it is equal to, if you take rubber material, it is almost equal to 0.7 megapascal. See the difference. For steel, it is equal to 400 into 10 raised to 9 pascal, and for rubber, it is equal to 0.7 into 10 raised to 6 pascal. This is the difference. And if the Young's modulus is higher, then we can say the material is more stiffer. Material is more stiffer. Stiffness of the materials will be very high if the Young's modulus is very high. So we can directly relate this stiffness and the Young's modulus E value. Okay, the material will be more elastic also. If the E value is more, material will be more elastic in nature. And for diamond, E value of the diamond is almost equal to 1200 gigapascal, which is very stiff in nature. It's very difficult to deform this material. Okay, so this directly indicates the stiffness of the material also. So if we need a spring with a high stiffness, we should select a material with a high E value. Then we got a spring with a higher stiffness. And similar to this elastic modulus of elasticity, the modulus of elasticity or Young's modulus is derived from the tensile stress strain diagram. Similarly, we have another stress strain diagram that is called shear stress strain diagram. So here we use normal stress, that is tensile stress and tensile normal strain. In this diagram we apply tensile stress, that is a normal stress, and strain is also a linear strain. Okay, but here we use a very thin tube. We take a very thin tube where we apply a torque, and when it is subjected to torque, any element on this material is subjected to pure shear. So based on the torque value, we can calculate the shear stress. Based on the angular twist, when we apply a torque on this material, there will be some twist. There will be some twist on this material. And based on the twist value, we can calculate this strain also. And the diagram is almost similar to stress strain diagram of the tensile test. And this is called shear stress strain diagram. And from this shear stress strain diagram also, we can see up to a point. This is called elastic limit. Up to elastic limit, the shear stress is proportional to shear strain. Shear stress is proportional to shear strain. Up to elastic limit. So we can say the tau is proportional to gamma shear strain. To remove the proportionality, tau is equal to some constant into gamma strain. G is equal to tau by gamma, and G is called shear modulus. Shear modulus or modulus of rigidity. Modulus of rigidity, that is equal to shear stress by shear strain. Shear modulus is equal to shear stress by shear strain. And where gamma is measured in radians and modulus of rigidity is expressed in Pascal also. This is also, the unit is also a Pascal, megapascal or gigapascal. Okay, and the modulus of rigidity of any given material is less than 1/2 but more than 1/3 of the modulus of rigidity of the material. Okay, less than 1/2 of the E or more than 1/3 of the E. So that is between the relation between E and G. And for any material, the G value will be greater than the E value. So for any material, the modulus of rigidity will be less than modulus of elasticity, or shear modulus is less than Young's modulus for any material. So, or we can say this is one of the important relationship may ask in the GATE questions. And if for a particular material, if G value is very high, is very large, then we can say the material is more rigid. It is very difficult to deform. Or for example, if this material is more if it has more G value, higher G value, then it is very difficult to change its shape. It is very difficult to change its shape. Okay, so deformation will be difficult if for a material with a high G value. For a material with a high E value, it is very difficult to elongate. It's very difficult to draw into a wire for a material with a high E value. But for a material with a G value, it is very difficult to change its shape. For example, I take a raw material like this. I need to convert into a material into final shape like this. I use a forging operation, applied a compressive stress. If the G value of this material is very large, it is very difficult to convert this shape into this shape, because change in shape is difficult if the G value is very high. So that is modulus of rigidity. And third one is bulk modulus. Bulk modulus. Bulk modulus. And bulk modulus is equal to normal stress or direct stress divided by volumetric strain. Volumetric strain. That is called bulk modulus. For example, consider a cube subjected to direct stress. Every direction the stress is same. That is called direct stress. Every direction the stress is same, sigma. For example, this material, this cube material is dipped inside water. Okay, dip inside the water. So water will exert a stress on the material that will be same in every direction. That is called direct stress. Direct stress. And what is volumetric strain? Volumetric strain is equal to change in volume by original volume. When this body is subjected to direct stress, there will be some change in volume. So the change in volume by original volume will be, original volume of this body will be volumetric strain. Volumetric strain. So the normal stressor by volumetric strain is called bulk modulus. Bulk modulus. So sigma n, bulk modulus is equal to sigma n by EV. Okay. And what is the importance of this bulk modulus? Bulk modulus, if it is higher one for a particular material, then it is very difficult to compress that material. Compress that material. Or it is very difficult to change the volume of that material. Compressibility is expressed in this term K, bulk modulus. Okay. We can change the shape of the material, but we cannot change the volume of the material. For the example, initially the volume of the material is 10 mm cube. We need to change the volume from 10 mm cube to 9 mm cube. So if this K value is very higher, then it is very difficult to change this volume by the application of direct stress. So that is the importance of bulk modulus. The compressibility of the material is directly dependent upon this K value. And what is the relation between these three constant values? The E will always greater than K is greater than G. Always this, for a particular material, Young's modulus is greater than bulk modulus and shear modulus or modulus of rigidity. So these three are the constant values of a particular material. These are the three constant values of a properties of a material. It will be a single value for a particular material. If E value is higher for a particular material, it is very difficult to elongate that material. It's very difficult to elongate or change the length of that material, or to reduce the length of that material if E is very high. Or we can say the stiffness of the material is very high if E value is very high. And for K value, if K value is very high, then material will be more incompressible. More incompressible. it's very difficult to change the volume of the material if K value is very high. And G value is the modulus of rigidity. If it is very high, then it is very difficult to change the shape of the material. We cannot force that type of material, or we cannot roll that type of material. It's very difficult to change the shape of that material if the G value is very high. So these are the three constant elastic constant values: Young's modulus, bulk modulus, and shear modulus, or modulus of elasticity, bulk modulus, modulus of rigidity. Okay, so these are the three constant values. So up to this, I stop this lecture. In the next lecture, we will develop a relationship between these three constant values, three constant elastic values. We will develop a relationship. There is a we can develop a formula for these three constant values. Okay, next lecture we will discuss about that. So thank you.